Welcome everyone to our talk today dedicated to the exhibition Emirati Expressions, the 4th edition, Conventions of Art. We have a group of our esteemed artists here with us. Both myself and my co-curator, Maisa Al Qassimi, will be moderating this conversation, which we hope will give you an insight to what our exhibition, which has been a long journey. We've been preparing for Emirati Expressions for nearly 2 years. And it's been a long time coming with the selection and the development of a lot of the projects. Today, in this panel, we have Rami Farook, Alia, Lootah, Khalid, Shafar, Zeinab Al Hashemi, and Lamya Gargash. And they are a part of a larger group of artists that are also represented in that exhibition. Just to give you a little brief of, let's say, the curatorial drive of why and how we came to develop the ideas for Emirati Expressions, we started to ask ourselves first, how can art be of use? We all know that art is divided into this idea of contemplation, and that design is the design or applied arts are those that are incorporated in life. This has been a long debate. This is not a new thing, and it's a polemic that has existed, let's put it this way, in the past century. But it's very interesting for us when we started to examine the scene here in the UAE. We've come to realize that there is a young generation of artists, like the ones present here, many who oscillate very fluidly and very naturally between the varieties of arts: applied, design, high art, painting, sculpture, interactive space, interior design, furniture, fashion. And there's such an ease in all of that process. And actually, there's a lot of artists that do that worldwide. But it was a very important thing for us to see that there is this generation particularly is doing that with an utmost ease and with frequency. So at the same time, for example, when we ask ourselves the question that exists in our society, the larger Arab Islamic society, arts has always been incorporated in life. Art is the carpet, art is the dish, art is your lampshade, your mashrabiya. It's absolutely integrated into the uses and incorporated in every value in our lives. There is no separation. And it's a question that is very important to us to start to understand how these logics can be assimilated. Is there something that we need to return to when we think about the incorporation of arts into our lives and immersing them within that? So that was the question on function and use that was very important for us. And then another important question was looking at the institutions that represent these ideas. It's a phenomena all across the Gulf for people who've lived here to know that prior to the museums or the cultural institutions, we've had a plethora of clubs and cultural community centers that have been very active for the society. So and we looked at the particular case of Abu Dhabi and found that that is indeed the case, and within the UAE as well, that is very much the case in the various cities. So looking at Abu Dhabi, because it's very hard to make that examination all across the UAE, there's so many clubs. The Armed Officers Club, the Sudanese Club, the Jordanian Club, the Indian Club, which was actually founded prior to the unification of the state, before the UAE was officially founded in 1967. So these institutions have served a community, a diverse community of people who belong here. It has provided for multiple cultural activities, folklore, dance, presented evenings, weddings, hosted multiple ceremonies with so many dignitaries. Again, the example of the Indian club, Indira Gandhi came and visited the club, and many others. So it really was a host for a lot of important activity, cultural activity for this country. And we asked some of the artists to look and examine these clubs, and some of them, already incorporated the idea of use or looking at community practice from within their own way of making art. We're starting with Emirati Expressions. We have a group of programs, and we're starting with a group of conversations with several artists. And I will now give it to Maisa to ask the first question for our artists.
Hi. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to ask a few questions to the artists, and we have a few images to show on the screen. I'll start with Lamya Gargash. Lamya, can you tell us about your project and the development, and if there were any challenges going along the way?
Hello, everyone. With regards to my work, I've always been extremely intrigued by interiors. I've been doing it for almost a decade now. I've documented everything from one-star hotels, homes, spaces, restaurants. And with this project, I felt that there was a strong connection between me and space. I wanted to project these cultural institutions that have served a big role in our society. They're probably overlooked in a lot of ways because they're not high-rises, they're not glitzy, they're not glamorous, but they're quirky. They've got certain physical, human qualities that I felt was necessary to preserve somehow. So when I started the process of documenting them, it was quite an experience because every space almost had, every space I visited had certain qualities that I wanted to project. And I've gone back and forth many times to certain clubs and stadiums, and gone back and forth and tried to project my vision and tried to capture what I saw with my own eyes through my camera. I was lugging around 5 different cameras, so every camera that I used had a different purpose and had a different way of projecting that vision. So the idea is to present humanness without having any humans in them. I wanted the audience to have an understanding of the space, to kind of delve into the details, to understand the composition, the structure, and maybe come up with their own narratives for what was going on in that space. So you have more, you've got the cultural foundation where you see the globe there, which is completely, in some ways, I completely abandoned, and then to something that's more active, like the Writers' Union or the National Theatre or the Officers' Club. So in some ways, they, even though they, in terms of activeness, human activeness in them, they still kind of projected that beautiful aesthetic that I wanted to somehow preserve. Be it melancholic, be it showcasing human activities. So that in a nutshell is what I was doing, documenting these clubs and institutions.
What was your biggest challenge?
The biggest challenge was, I guess, communication with a lot of the administration. There's always this misunderstanding with regards to why I'm there and why we were carrying this huge suitcase around with equipment, and I guess it's trying to get through the front door and being a woman, and sometimes they felt the need to have someone chaperone because it was me and my assistant, and it was like, no, I think we can do it on our own. We've been doing it for some time now, so I guess communication was a drawback, but in general everyone was very welcoming, and even though they thought I was an events photographer and they asked me to come by and photograph whatever events they had, it was still nice to see that that they were very relaxed about me being there. And
I've gotten a few emails asking about the images, so they're really excited and looking forward to seeing them.
No, definitely.
Okay, let's move to Zeinab. Zeinab, you've created this unbelievable structure. Can you tell us the process and how it came to life?
Hi, everyone. So, first of all, the title of the piece is Camouflage, which means camouflage. And I'm sorry if I confused everyone, but it also has that meaning of it being looked as from a distance, which has the same meaning of camouflage effect. You could think it's like a desert. As you come closer to the sculpture, you realize that it's actually made out of camel hides. And so when I first heard about Emirati Expression, I was invited to participate with a piece. The theme was basically to look at how art can be used, how could it be functional, and the uses of art. And to me, I always like to discuss a certain overlooked object that could sometimes also be a sort of a pop culture at some point through time. So to me, one of the iconic things in the UAE is the camel, which is known as the ship of the desert as well. So I always try to take a certain iconics and try to sort of go into the origin of that and look at it through time and how it had changed over time. And to me, it was looking at the uses of camel, looking at the how the camel has been a very a living function with its uses in the desert throughout the Bedouins' lives. And to me, I realized that a lot of those uses were mostly done for different survival reasons, for like a lifestyle. And going from that time and coming back to our time, I was comparing those uses of the camel, and I realized that most of those uses were actually looked as more of a luxury, whether you own a camel, or it's in a camel races, or even like as in like the piece over here with the camel leather. The search for the camel leather and the camel hides was actually sort of a long process that started a couple of years ago. And I've used camel leather, but I've used it in more of like a treated leather. So when I went back to the factory, I looked at those camel hides that were left on the side, and this is where the dialogue started with the factory, and I asked them, so what happens to those hides? And they said, well, they're not in the best condition. So they're left on the side and kept until someone would be like sort of interested in them. But yet they also come to a price because, well, you know, it's as I said, like the camels are, it's an expensive commodity. So I started gathering those pieces without me really knowing what is it that I'm going to be doing with them. I just knew that I want to show the functionality of the camel in an artwork. Again, a lot of my pieces, or especially in this one, I always like to have some sort of a interactive sense in my work, where people notice a piece and somehow it's appealing when they notice that piece, but then when they come close to it, they realize that they can actually interact with the work. They can, and this is what's happening with the piece over here. People are more than welcome to actually sit with the sculpture that somehow looks like a desert dune, but it could also be like you're sitting on a hump of a camel as well. So this is basically like the work that was that I felt was needed to bring in this show for so many different reasons, and definitely to not just look if art could be used, but more of looking at the camel as the art, as the masterpiece of the work.
Thank you. Did you have a challenge?
Well, the challenges are, I would see it as a conceptual artist. I have usually a lot of like different ideas that I'd like to vision in a certain way, in a certain form. So in most of my work, I've collaborated with either designers, architects, craftsmen, artisans, and even I've worked at some point with the labor workers. So to me, those are not people who help me make the work, but those are collaborations. I see them as a teamwork. It goes as every project works as to me to see who I would like to collaborate with. And for instance, I don't look at it as a challenge as much as it's a nice process of learning about my work and involve others to also help me create it. So when this idea first started, it was, the way I looked at it is that I wanted a floating desert. And the challenge was that I would just draw it in a sketch, and then the hard part would be with the people that I work with and to find out a way to make it doable, especially that it's not just a piece that you would see from a distance, but it needs to be, to handle the weight of people like walking across it or actually sitting on it. Like we've seen at least 10 people sitting around it.
Yes.
I would highly recommend for you to sit but not walk on it. We'd like to keep it as clean as possible. So yeah, these were one of the challenges, but then again, within the kind of teamwork, there's always a way, there's always a solution, and those technical solutions are always interesting to learn about all the time.
Thank you, Zeinab. Khalid Shafar, we come to you, the master of transforming narratives into an installation. I'm going to put this up, and maybe you can start telling your story.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I think the cabin installation in Emirati Expressions was a full challenge. I would start with a challenge than anything else. I think there was different reason for this. I was given the Abu Dhabi Sailing and Yacht Club to look at and work on an installation preparing or referencing part of the history there. And we went for a field trip. We found that beautiful ship in the middle of the club yard, abandoned, and no one allowed to even get along that. So I start asking questions about what is the existence of this, what's the history of it. And here where I start hearing different stories. People who lived in Abu Dhabi saying something, people who visited saying something. So we already discussed a few stories, like it's like an early gift to the late Sheikh Zayed from Kuwait in the early 70s. So that's one of the facts we got. And then I think it was proved by this black and white picture I have seen in the club walls itself. And I think this is the one that struck me the most. But other stories were like the ship was used as, after he passed away, as restaurants for a couple of years. And I know some people have experienced these restaurants. There is evidence of it's been restaurants. There's tables there inside still. There is a little bakery down next to the entrances. So there was different stories, but I think listening to all of this, one of the things I wanted to is to stop at one particular fact and not go too much into the details. I don't want to go and research further. I just want to invent my own installation based on a certain fact, and there is a certain evidence, which was this particular black and white picture. So I stopped there, and I thought I would take the function of that dhow or that ship and how it was used at those days, which is the viewing, because the late Sheikh Zayed used that ship as more of like a viewing deck to watch the races, the sailing competitions, receiving guests, and then enjoying the competitions on the water. Mind you that this boat wasn't in the water. It was brought to the shore from the first day, so it never touched the water. And that was another thing that interested me. Like, wow, this is like it meant to be in the water, and it was brought and being as a viewing deck, where they could construct a viewing deck instead. So that all these facts were something really interested me to take and to start working on something about it. But again, another challenge was I was about to work on something partially in the club and partially here. But then the ship doesn't allow us to go deep into doing something there. And then we decided all to bring the whole exhibition or the whole installation inside in the exhibition here in the Minaret. So that was for me as well, like, okay, now the plans change. And I think that was like just a few months, 3 months maybe before the exhibition start. So I had to kind of shift my plans, but then focus on something inside. So how can I present to you that whole history there without you visiting or maybe not knowing about this fact in such a closed space? So here where the story of an enclosed space came to place. Like I wanted you to have an experience, but at the same time keeping one common things between both, whatever is the club and whatever is inside Emirati Expressions is the function. So as I told you, the function of that ship was a viewing deck, and the function of the cabin here is the viewing as well. However, the experience is totally different, but I do still have to draw some references from that piece of history. So that's why I went with a larger scale of space to give you a kind of that grandness of this ship. When you just stand, your scale to that scale of the ship body is like there is a huge comparison. So you see that ship, you see the paneling from the outside of this space. It's actually kind of imitating the body of the ship itself. And then when you start going in, taking off your shoes for sure, and then going in, you start feeling that sculpted kind of carpet inside, which was made to resonate or to reference the sand. And this is, again, part of the story, that this ship was always on the shore, it wasn't in the water. But then you start viewing all this reflection on the wall and wonder where are all these blue circulars coming from. And suddenly you start viewing upwards, and then you see that piece, which is the ceiling. The ceiling is made of around 420 gal, which is the headband that the man wears here. And there is different shades of blue of plexiglass inserted in between. And the reason many people have seen this, and that's maybe, again, a minor challenge, I would say that people thought it's just a reference to my own work, because I used the gal in different products since 2011. But here, for me, it was meaning to be part of the story than my work. So it was mainly this whole entourage and all these people and guests used to be with the late Sheikh Zayed coming on board. They were all men, local, wearing the gal. So these 400 plus, referencing all these men who came on the viewing deck of that boat that time. So it's referencing that past, but bringing you back to today's. So this is how the whole thing connects. It's the function that it's in that piece of history in the club, and the function you are doing here. Yet the difference is you are in totally different space. You have totally different view. You are not seeing horizontal, upwards, something else, and then it's totally different experience that you are feeling. It's not the adrenaline of the competition and racing. It's mainly that peace and silence you have inside the space.
Thank you, Khalid. I hope all of you can go into the exhibition after this and experience these works after the artists have shed light on them.
Take off your shoes.
And take off your shoes.
And read the story, please, because maybe I would highlight just quick on 10 seconds that I think most of the feedback I got that it's a beautiful space and beautiful colors, but I think the meaning is very deep. So that's why I invite everyone to read the story and get later on into the space, because you need to understand what is all this nice space is about. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Khalid. So similarly to Khalid Shafar, who was inspired by the Yacht and Sailing Club, Alia Lootah had a visit with Reem and myself and went to the armed forces and was very much inspired by the archives that are displayed in the lobby of the club itself. So Alia, would you walk us through your process of creating these paintings?
I think I'll start like Khalid with the challenges, because the challenge was at the beginning, not in the process of making the work. And when I was approached by Reem and Maisa, they told me that we're dealing with different clubs in Abu Dhabi, and we think that you should work with the Officers Club, and what do you think? And we looked at the other clubs. And I honestly think that I have no connection with the Officers Club. I'm from Dubai, and I just recently moved to Abu Dhabi. I don't know anyone from my family who was in the army, or I don't have stories, and my work is about stories, it's about memories. So I went to the Officers Club with Maisa, and they were all like, okay, Alia, we don't have time. You have to look at all the images quickly. So we were like, we'll come again, Alia, take your time. And then this arcade that Maisa was talking about was sort of like a zigzag of a lot of images in a very thick glass with bolts. And it seems like the images were really hidden, and I couldn't see the real picture. And then we tried somehow to get these images from the archives of the Officers Club. Can you take them out? We want to scan them. And then I thought, you know what? I don't want to see the image very well. And I don't want to know who these people are. It's not about the army or the Officers Club. It's about these images that touched me in that space. And what touched me, and maybe you can see in these little portraits here, is I selected faces that were interesting to me in these group photographs. There are many, many photos. I don't know, like 100, around 100 or more, I don't know. And these were selected from group pictures, and some of them were really small. So what I did was I looked at this image, and it took me time to select. Sometimes it takes me more time to mix the right kind of black for the portrait than it takes me to do the portrait itself. So it was really important for me to emphasize on the idea of the time that passed while these images were there under constant constant light. And it was even difficult to close the lights because they were like, no, security and people need to see where they're going. So I assumed that these images became part of the Officers Club, part of the architecture, part of this corridor. So moving on to the selection of the images, it was not easy, and every time I'd go through the images again and select faces, but what attracted me the most is the human being, the individual in these pictures. And I don't know if the colors are I'm a bit picky with the colors, so you can see them better in real life. And it was, especially this painting, the color was very important because for me, what I saw in this image was the void, the presence and the void at the same time, the uncertainty, the fact that I was interested in this person, but yet I didn't want to know who he was when this picture was taken. And this process of work started maybe in around 2009, where I was really interested between the relationship between photography and painting. And the photograph is, of course, there's a lot of things said about photographs. They're not real, they're real, it's, you know, it's an altered reality, it's all of these things. But for me, a photograph is just a moment of time, and it depends on how the photographer decided to capture this image and why. But for me, how I look at it as a painter is completely unreal. It's painting, there's nothing like painting. Photograph is not like painting. Drawing is not like painting. It's the pigment as opposed to light in photography. Light captures the image and it captures this time. But painting is your own perception of how you see these people. I don't know if you have the big picture, but you can all go and see it there. I changed a lot of details based on what I saw. So for me, it's something, even if it's the Officers Club, it became something personal. And it's an ongoing process where I started with that for the Women's Museum. I looked at archives of girls in schools and I created little portraits. But I think that it interested me here more to look more into the physical aspect of a photograph and how even the sizes are different because these are not the same people. They're in the same group, they're in the army, but each one of them has a story and each one of them is just like us.
I wanted to also just say that I think when Maisa and I thought of you for the Armed Officers Club, we were very aware of the fact that a lot of our colleagues were being drafted into the army, that this was a topic that was there and prevalent for the society. And we thought, having seen the images, that your work would be excellently paired to address this topic in the most poetic way possible. And I just wanted to ask you, what do you think about that? And the fact that it's coming at this specific time, which is very loaded.
Yeah. I mean, this happened sort of in between the whole, political events that happened here in the Gulf. But when I was looking at the images of people and the news and everything, it didn't necessarily relate, but I'm sure it would relate to many people who have their family members in the army, but for me, it's not only about the army. It's interesting that you can see it now and maybe you can think about what's happening and about the disappearance of our colleagues, like you said. But for me, it's about loss in a way. And it means, this series meant a lot to me in many personal ways. And each one of them has a story. I remember where I painted each one of them, what I was thinking, and it's sort of a meditative thing. So I'm sure it touches each one of, I hope it touches each one of you in a different personal way, because this is what I want. I don't want to impose any feeling on anyone.
Rami. Hala. Rami has a project that is about to happen. You have to believe it. You have to believe in Rami for it to happen. Rami has 2 projects that are with Emirati Expressions. It has a lot of projects, but he has 2 projects within Emirati Expressions. One is the stickers that you see in the exhibition, which is this. And I'll let him speak to that. But there's also the goalposts, which you don't see in the exhibitions. You see it, you're going to be able to see it within the city as soon as it's up and running. Rami, can you tell us about your projects and challenges?
Testing. Assalamu alaikum. Hi, everyone. So about a year ago, I think it was in October, Maisa and Reem told me, Rami, ta'al, let's meet up. What are you up to? And I sat down and I told them about some things I had in mind. One was, I had this idea of putting up goalposts on empty plots around the city. And it started off in my neighborhood. And I actually went out and I bought 2 goalposts and I put them up in my neighborhood. I'm not asking for permission or anything, just putting them up and seeing what happens. You see, I grew up in a fridge in Sharjah where the mal'ab was the heart of the fridge. It's where all the boys met up and how we made friends and everything. And so I did that. And over the year, I saw how that activated the neighborhood. The other project was about the smile. And it was, at around that time, I had the idea of going to Dubai Mall and smiling at strangers. And I did it for about an hour, dressed more or less the way that I am. For literally 1 hour, I was making eye contact and smiling at everyone I was meeting. No teeth, just... and to see people's reactions. And do you guys want to know what happened? So in the 1 hour, only 4 people smiled at me. Everyone was looking away from me, actually, surprisingly. I thought maybe the girls would look away, but actually Khaliji men were also looking away. And the only people the first smile came from, I think, a Bengali guy cleaning the hammam, Allah yaskum. The second was an Egyptian guy sampling perfumes. Ya Sheikh, Angel, Terry Mugler, And then the other 2 were at a cafe that I went to. So basically, nobody smiled. I continued this. We were just, actually, I just came back from honeymoon yesterday, guys. Thank you. In New York, I did a few more interventions, and I did one called an Arab artist coughing in an American museum. I'll tell you about this later. But I continued. I know, but I continued with the smile.
Rami, calm, caring,
Okay, خلاص.
Consistent.
So basically, the third thing, I'll skip the smile completely. The third thing I told them is I want to do something with parenting. And eventually, this is what happened. And it happened in the form of stickers that ended up going to Kochi. I printed out 500 English, 500 Malayali, and 500 a picture of an Arab man smiling with a pineapple of myself. And we just put it up around the city. She gets into a tuk-tuk, a rickshaw, she sees it, she gets in touch with me, and this happens.
And I find out that he made friends with a taxi driver and that...
So there was like a whole campaign, because one of my dearest friends is a rickshaw driver in Kochi. I gave him 500 of the Arab man, 500 English, 500 Malayali, and he just distributed. He did such a good job. He was telling me people were coming up to him and telling him, please, one photo for my house. People really loved it. You know what I mean? So, and it was in Kerala. What I loved it's so random. So, back to, what would you like to know? Tell me.
Parenting.
Parenting, the 4 C's of parenting. So I was a single father of 2 children, an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old. And so for 5 years, I raised these kids on my own. So you can imagine, طبعاً, parenting is a mission. And we had visited actually 2 years ago refugee camps in Jordan, and we did a project over there. But the idea of parenting is very important to us, and I think there's going to be a lot. So for example, 10,000 of these stickers, I'm planning to take them to the UAE refugee camp in Jordan to make sure that every father, son, and mother has one of these stickers, and to see how behavior is going to change, because they've changed my behavior with my children, and all the people that got them have actually made use of them as
Rami,
you know.
Reem and myself had an interview with the National.
Okay.
And she walked through the exhibition with us and said, "Oh my God, I have that sticker on my fridge. That really helps me to be a good parent."
Alhamdulillah.
She had no idea that that was
Alhamdulillah.
the intention of those 4 C's.
Alhamdulillah.
So, I mean, we thought that was fascinating.
It's amazing. So, and each one costs 4.5 fils, guys. Can you imagine? Yani 10 of them, 100 are for 45 dirhams. That's what it costs.
Yeah, and I like how you, in one of your interviews, you said that you wanted it to be a way to exchange and trade ideas between people. The stickers become a manifest object to do that. I want to pose a question on some of you, which I think we've got a lot of feedback from the exhibition. A lot of the artwork is seen as, is this design? Is this art? These demarcations are really hard for people to start to appreciate work. And I did want to ask you, A, how do you define yourself? As an artist or as a designer? Do you see your work as art or as design? That really fraught relationship, how do you mitigate it? Khalid, do we want to start with you?
Sure, I think you picked the right one. I think, yes, I would define myself, I'll always say Emirati product designer, full stop. And the reason why, I've been debating this, designer, artist. Some agreed, some not. But I think who doesn't agree is maybe because they don't understand my rationale, why I define them. I'm not defining them from the aesthetic or from the outcome, because there's always an aesthetic side to an art piece or a design piece. But I think I'm debating the function or the process the designer go through and the artist go through. And that's where I think the differences happened. It's the process that we take to realize something, realize an object, a design object, or realize an art piece or an art project. I think that was one of the challenges I didn't even raise in my description, is to be among, I think, a very esteemed group of artists, and to have a work that will kind of melt in between and will be fit with the whole context of the whole exhibition itself. I define myself I narrowed my definition is almost to a functional designer. And I think because I always insist that function is important for me and important to every single piece I do design and create. I do have other, let's say, angles I look at in terms of practicality or, let's say, creativity, but functionality is very important. So when I came to this project, as one of them, that being with all these esteemed artists, how would my work fit? Would I be creating an object? Either it's a piece of furniture that will reflect what I want to say about the club, or would it be an installation? And I think, for me as a designer, installation is my escape way or my exit way that I could be in between of art and design. It's allowing me that room of experiment.
Okay, so my reverse question is that, why can't art be functional?
It is, some of it is. And this is what I'm saying. Even in design, we sometimes design for art, which means we design pieces that they are not meant to be used, even if we inject the function into them, but they are meant to be decorative. And maybe we here talk about the collectible design, and that's where that category came in existence. With art as well, and this is where we go back to the aesthetic of the piece, because some people look at my work, which is functional 100%, as art pieces more than functional furniture.
Yeah.
And the same thing when we look at, and so the person who's looking at my piece as an art piece, which is functional, this is when we look at art being functional. Because this person is looking at my functional object as an art piece, but this art piece is functional at the same time, which is applying to what you're asking for. But I think it's not the viewer that now in this dilemma, it's us, the practitioner. It's the designer or the artist. So for me, it's like, if, do I want to be defined as a designer or as an artist, or my work to be defined as design work or as an artwork? I think that's, again, up to me to set my parameters. And for me, I think I want to educate that's the differences in the process, but not to have a borders or let's say a cage to say, don't put my work among the other artwork, I'm a design work.
I'll get back to you for 1 second, but I'm gonna, yeah, Zeinab. I mean, you've done both as well, and especially with this work, like how do you feel? People can sit on it and...
Can you guys hear me? Okay, yeah. So I think I want to go a little bit back when I first started as a graphic designer. I studied art and design, and I graduated as a graphic designer because this is the natural way of of getting into the workplace, of course. That plan completely failed. So I decided to become, no, it's not that it failed. It's just that I was being more honest with myself. I felt like the need that I need to, instead of working on other people's visions and ideas, I'd like to work on mine. So I started with mixed media, and then it turned into a little bit of mixed media with sort of like installations. Slightly it started turning into like what I would call modern sculpture. And then because my background was also design, I participated, as you remember, with a couple of design programs. I exhibited in design fairs, but I think I stopped defining myself because I was a designer 3 weeks ago in Dubai Design Week, and today I'm a conceptual artist in Abu Dhabi Art. So I'm leaving it up to people to decide where I'm at in every show or in every work. But I think what's important to me as a learning process, or as I'm moving to the next projects, is to really find what fits for that purpose of that space. Because most of my work revolves around topics like time and space. And I get inspired by just observing with things that come from either the past and they still exist in the present. So I don't know, like for me, really, like I think the best option for me is just to stop defining. And to me, I mainly focus on different types of collaborations, meaning like I said, I would always collaborate with different makers. And at some point when we worked together at a couple of old shows, the way it was defined, and I wasn't the one to define this, but it was said that I'm the dreamer, and the people I work with are the realists, and we meet halfway in between. So this is how it is. Yeah.
Rami, do you want to tackle this question? Design, art and design?
Well, I think in some instances, like ours over here with the stickers, design did play a role, right? When we think of art and the action of art, it was the stickers, but then within it was picking the size, picking the font, and how it's going to be highlighted and all that. So they work together sometimes.
So would you, if someone came to you and said, I mean, you're a designer, you're not an artist by doing this project.
Oh, a designer is an artist.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that statement, but there's others who don't and keep the demarcation. So I mean, I think it's a debatable thing, and it's something still evolving. I personally feel it's much easier to assimilate all into the larger framework of art than it is to go back into definitions and closures, but it is a long debate. for a long, long time, and Khalid doesn't like it, so it's fine from within our own. And another very important element, as we've spoken about, is the idea of community, and how a lot of the artists really, we wanted to stay in touch with the community through all of these projects and through all of these artworks. Lamya, a question for you. How do you feel was your work connected to community through your work?
My work always talks about, is it clear? My work always talks about the human experience. So I know that when I first started documenting interiors, I got a lot of people asking me why I've done it and why there aren't any people in there and why is it so kind of eerie, I guess. And my fascination was because I felt that time was of the essence. And I remember for my master's degree, when my thesis was about talking about human presence and tackling the interior rather than exterior. And I found that my biggest challenges was not photographing people, but photographing their own space, their own private domains. And I'd gone back a week before my final to re-photograph something that I was very worried would be gone by the time I got there. So my work is all about making sure I'm capturing what I see, because change is not just something on the surface, it's very much on the inside. When you change the composition of space, you change the way we communicate. Social etiquettes change, and I believe that the way we communicate changes. Back in the day, spaces were more informal. You could hang around wherever you wanted to, whereas now every room seems to have a designated role. And it changes in terms of color, in terms of the way the light falls through into it. So a lot of my studies are, even though a lot of people assume that photography is just a click of a button, I spend quite a lot of time in a space, and once I kind of find the groove, and it's almost quite meditative, really, because you look at every single angle of that space and see what resonates and see how that would expose or I guess showcase your vision. And I still work with old mediums of photography, so I still work with films and Polaroids, and it takes quite some time for me to get all my films in, and the process is quite slow. So I do remember documenting spaces where people would just stand guard watching me, and they would think that it's just a matter of a second. But really, I need to look into the lighting, take a few Polaroids, test the light, shoot, and it's quite a process. But I do enjoy the idea of, I find that complements my work because I'm excited to look at the outcome of it. It's no longer instant, and I like the fact that still exists. And in terms of functionality, I think even with photography, it's functional because you think, and it allows you to kind of get really to delve into space or delve into that photograph, and you wonder. At least that's how I see it. Things that are mundane and things that people overlook, to some degree, have a certain aesthetic and appeal that, if you give it, it's only a matter of just staying put and just allowing yourself to appreciate surroundings. So I believe all forms of art are functional, be it interactive physically or mentally. It really depends on how you want to project your vision.
I think actually we've had a lot of reactions from your photos, particularly as soon as people enter to the space and they see the images, which are very iconic of these clubs. And they're like, oh, we remember this club, and they try to recognize where these spaces are. And they've evoked a lot of memories of people talking about that. We also have a part of the exhibition, which is a dedicated archive to some of these clubs that have lent us a lot of their memorabilia and images to reflect on all of the activities that they've done. And we've decided as a different format to, instead of open it up to allow you to ask us questions, which we will allow you, but we wanted to ask you, the audience, if any of you, especially people who are resident in the UAE, have any memories related to the clubs that you'd like to share with the audience and with us, because I think that is something that is deeply important for us about reviving these spaces. Anyone care to share a story? Anyone? I saw, yeah.
Assalamu alaikum. My English is not as good as yours, but I think you will understand me. My name is Huda Saadi. Actually, I came here because I am part of Military Museum Project team in Ministry of Defense and GHQ. I did come and visit your exhibition 2 days ago, and I really like what our men and young girls are doing there. And suddenly I think, how can we use your ideas in touch with the community? And I was just imagining your ideas in our museum or in our theater, which is in the history of military and the collections of our objects also. So I really, really wish to have your addresses or your cards, because we have to meet again with my superiors and discuss how can we work this out. And about my, I wasn't a part of that place, but I read about it a lot, and it is the first military office in United Arab Emirates in Abu Dhabi, and it is not the officer club. Actually, it is only an old building now. We are trying to save that. You know, when you are going into the Al-Maqta' bridge, do you see that old forest? Just beside it, there is a history there, and there is a very important building there, which is now just dusty old building. We hope they will not remove it, but you guys, maybe if we can organize that, you visit it, and maybe you can base a story over it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else care to share? Yes, please.
Hi everyone. I remember my dad taking us to the officers club as a child because my dad was part of the army, and I remember walking those hallways and trying to find my father in between the pictures, and trying to spot my uncles and stuff. So I really, really, really felt nostalgic looking at your pictures. So that's what I wanted to share.
One more here.
Remembering the officers club as well. I had my daughter's 6th birthday at the officers club when it opened in 1997. We were excited to find a spot that had a big patch of green that the kids could play and run in. At that time, there weren't that many. And they had an amazing German executive chef who made wonderful tarts with date. So that is my memory. And we had birthdays there ever since.
Anyone else? Cultural Foundation, Wahda Club, Jazeera Club, Jordanian, Sudanese.
Hello. The image of the Cultural Foundation with the globe really, really resonated for me. Once we went on a school field trip with our Arabic class, and we went to the Cultural Foundation. There was some exhibition up that we were looking to see. And it was time to go home. I did not want to go back to school. And so I spent a good amount of time hiding behind that globe. And I will never forget. I will never forget hearing my Arabic teacher, Miss Farra. I don't know if she's here, but she was looking and had all of my friends trying to find me, and I was just there, right behind that globe, breathing heavy and just waiting for somebody to find me or not. I ended up going back to class, unfortunately.
Give it to you and then
the globe itself, yes. I'd be very happy to have it.
Thank you, Munira.
Thank you.
Well, we'll open it up to questions from the audience, if any of you have questions to the artists or to us.
Last call. Oh, here we have a question. Okay, I just tear it up.
I'm sorry, as always, I'm probably a bit late, but mine was a memory because these were the places. I went in to view the exhibition first with the arrogance of the artist. I'm going to see the concepts behind all this. And suddenly I was transported into places where I was the age of the artist sitting on the stage doing this. And it was actually a very moving experience to be brought back 30 years. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Especially Khalid's book.
Thank you.
Here, so we have a-
Thank you very much. I like very much the exhibition, and I think it's great that you can touch the art, and people love to sit, for example, on the art and get an interaction with each other. And even the children love the art. So, for example, this bench where you can remove some sticks and write something on the bench, the children go crazy when they see that and pick them and do something with that. So I love that very much, that you invite the audience to participate and interact with the art. And I was wondering, so for example, Zeinab, if I may ask you, was it intentionally planned that people can sit on your art? Was it really meant to be, or is it just by accident that people love it so much and then, they do it?
I think I would like to go with the first conversation that I had with the curators, Reem and Maisa, and it was actually, it started with a project that I did maybe 2 years ago, which started also about the camel leather. And in that piece, it was mainly a product design, like it was a functional camel rug piece, which people can purchase, that I've designed in an old exhibition. And this time it was like, how about you can remake it again in a way where people could actually be able to just sit around and experience it all over again, maybe on a bigger scale. And this is where I felt the need that I can use that old piece as an inspiration, but still can push the boundaries of what could be used and looked as a functional art piece. And to me, I wasn't even, when I've designed this piece, it wasn't meant for it to be comfortable. I mean, if you went and tried to sit on it, it's not a piece of furniture. So definitely, comfort was not part of having thought of in the piece, but it was mainly experiencing a certain being maybe in the desert, but yet it could be experiencing being around camels in the desert, sort of thing. And I think it was definitely thought of while creating the work, which meant that we had to figure out a way of making it durable to people's weight and safety reasons. Also, we had to think of ways of having it safe enough for people to sit around it. And the polygon shape of the desert did not allow us to have it maybe very safe, but yet we had to manage for it to be somehow able for it to be accessible for people. A lot of the pieces I've worked before also have its own way of interaction, meaning people could be interested to just touch the piece, or they're more than welcome to, the piece that I have in Dubai right now, people can climb it somehow. So in a way, it's very welcoming, and I think this is very important because through my process, through my work, I always want people, the public, to be interested in art without them realizing that this is actually an artwork. Maybe they could think of it as more of a platform or a playground, or just similar for kids. I'd like for kids to know that art could mean more than just it could be more than just it's not just an expression or a feeling, but also could be of use. So I think that answers your question.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, I'm afraid our time has come to an end.
Oh, yeah.
But I think the message of approachability and questions of where art is going to go remain with us. Thank you so much for all the audience members for staying with us throughout this talk. And thank you for the artists.
Thank you.